All right, let's dive into the story of one of North India's last great Hindu emperors, a man named Harshavardhana. Now, if you're thinking this is just going to be another history lesson full of dry dates and battles, you could not be more wrong. The story of Harsha is a genuine epic. We're talking about family tragedy, a desperate rescue mission, incredible cultural achievements, and a legacy that, honestly, leaves us with some really tough questions. This is the story of a boy who never wanted to be a king but became an emperor because of one disaster after another.
And this quote right here, it gets to the absolute heart of the story. You know, we picture emperors rising to power through ambition, through ruthless conquest. But Harsha's journey is completely different. His reign wasn't born from a hunger for power, but from a desperate, frantic need to save the last of his family. His empire wasn't some grand plan. It was forged in the fire of a personal crisis. And that one fact, it just changes how you look at everything he did afterward.
So to really get Harsha, you've got to understand the world he was born into. After the mighty Gupta Empire collapsed, the whole political map just shattered. I mean, look at this. It was a chaotic patchwork of kingdoms all fighting for their piece of the pie. You had the Maitriyas over here in the west, the Makkaris right in the heartland around Kannauj, and then, up north, Harsha's own family, the Pushyabhutis, ruling the small but really important kingdom of Thaneswar. It was a time of constant change, shifting alliances, and danger around every corner. This is the volatile, high-stakes world that a young Harsha was about to inherit.
And that inheritance, well, it came way sooner and way more brutally than anyone could have possibly imagined. This first part of our story isn't about some grand strategy. It's about a series of personal tragedies that happened so fast it's hard to believe, forcing a teenager to step up and face dangers that would have broken most grown men. The very foundation of his empire is built on loss.
Just look at these dates. This is a nightmare unfolding within a single year. First, in 605 AD, Harsha's powerful father dies. In her grief, his mother commits sati, a historical practice where a widow would join her husband on the funeral pyre. The throne passes to Harsha's older brother, Harshavardhana. But then, almost immediately, their sister, Rajasri's husband, is killed. Harshavardhana marches off to get revenge. He succeeds, but then he's treacherously murdered in 606 AD by a rival king, Sasanka of Bengal. And just like that, Harsha has lost his father, his mother, and his brother.
So now, at just 16 years old, Harsha is the head of the family. And the crisis isn't even over. He gets word that his widowed sister, Rajyasri, has escaped captivity and run off into the dense Vindhya forests to commit sati herself. For Harsha, this is it. He isn't thinking about a crown or a kingdom, he's thinking about his only sister. His very first act as a leader isn't to claim a throne, but to lead a desperate search party into the wilderness to find her and save her life.
And this is where a personal act just explodes into massive political consequences. Harsha finds his sister at the very last second and talks her down. And by doing that, he doesn't just save his family, he completely redraws the map of India. See, Rajasri was the queen of the powerful kingdom of Kannauj. With her husband gone and no heirs, the nobles of Kannauj basically say, "Hey Harsha, will you take our throne?" And suddenly, this 16-year-old kid is the ruler of two major kingdoms. He moves his capital to the more central Kannauj, and just like that, a family tragedy becomes the foundation of an empire.
Okay, so now Harsha has this unexpected dual kingdom, and he's got to secure it. The reluctant prince is forced to become a warrior king. This next chapter of his life is all about military campaigns. He has to avenge his brother, lock down his borders, and bring the fractured lands of North India under one banner. The personal mission is now an imperial one, and it's about to reshape the subcontinent.
And wow, was he successful. He starts systematically taking apart the people who hurt his family. He defeats Deva Gupta of Malwa. He makes a brilliant alliance with the kingdom of Kamarupa, modern-day Assam, to put the squeeze on his great rival, Sasanka of Bengal. After Sasanka dies, Harsha finally takes his kingdom, getting revenge for his brother. He also played the diplomat, bringing the kingdom of Vallabhi into his orbit with a smart marriage. For 40 years he fought, and at his peak, his empire united North India in a way nobody had seen since the Guptas.
For decades, it just seemed like Harsha could not be stopped. His armies marched from one victory to the next, cementing his power and making him the supreme lord of northern India. He had avenged his family, secured his kingdom, and built a massive empire. So, like so many great conquerors, with the north under his thumb, he started looking for new worlds to conquer. His eyes turned south, to the rich and powerful Deccan Plateau.
But the Deccan had its own champion, the Chalukya king Pulakeshin II. When Harsha marched his huge army south, he finally met his match.
And what's amazing is how the victory was recorded. This quote comes from an inscription Pulakeshin had made. See, the word Harsha in Sanskrit literally means joy. So the court poet created one of the most brilliant and brutal puns in military history, carving into stone for all time that Harsha's joy melted away in fear when he faced the Chalukyan army. It was his first and only major defeat, a public humiliation that drew a permanent line in the sand at the southern edge of his empire.
So, we know Harsha the warrior, but what was it actually like to live in his empire? How did it all work? Well, lucky for us, we don't have to guess. We have an incredible eyewitness account from one of the most famous travelers in world history, a man who gives us an unparalleled, on-the-ground look at Harsha's world. That man was Xuanzang, a Chinese Buddhist monk who went on a dangerous 17-year journey to India to collect original Buddhist scriptures. He spent about 15 of those years right there in India, a huge chunk of it inside Harsha's empire. And this guy was a sharp observer. He wrote down everything: politics, religion, social customs, the economy, in his famous book, The Cu Key. Because of him, we know so much about this period. In fact, Harsha himself heard about this brilliant monk and actually sought him out, becoming his patron and friend. So, thanks to people like Xuanzang, we know how Harsha ran things. You can see he had specialized roles for everything. But here's the key difference from earlier empires. His administration was more decentralized. What does that mean? Basically, instead of a strong central government controlling every little thing, Harsha relied on local lords. He'd grant them land, and in return, they'd supply him with troops. It's a pretty effective way to rule a huge area, but it also meant their loyalty was to him, personally, not to the idea of the empire. And that little detail, it's going to become really important later on.
Now this is really fascinating. It tells you exactly what Harsha's priorities were. According to Xuanzang, the government's income was split into 4 equal parts. Only a quarter went to actually running the state. Another quarter paid the salaries of ministers. But look at the other half. A full 25% was set aside just for rewarding scholars, writers, and artists, and the final 25% was just given away as charity to different religious groups. This shows you a ruler who cared just as much about culture, knowledge, and faith as he did about running the government.
And here's where we get a really human and kind of funny contradiction. Xuanzang observed that the laws in Harsha's kingdom were super strict, even stricter than in the Gupta era. Punishments were severe. So, on paper, law and order looked great. And yet, on his own travels through the empire, Xuanzang himself got robbed by bandits. It's a perfect example of the gap between official policy and what's actually happening on the ground. It's a wonderfully honest detail that makes his account so valuable. Beyond the battlefield and the government, Harsha's most lasting legacy is in his support for religion, culture, and education. This is the part of his story that actually outlived his empire and still echoes today. His own personal journey of faith and his massive support for learning really changed the cultural landscape of North India and left a mark on history that you can still see. Harsha's own faith wasn't static, it evolved. He was born into a family that worshipped the Hindu god Shiva. But 2 people really influenced him: his sister, Rajyasree, who was a Buddhist, and of course the great traveler Xuanzang. Under their influence, Harsha converted and became a huge supporter of Mahayana Buddhism. But here's the crucial part: he never became intolerant. He continued to honor Hindu scholars and support other faiths, creating a kind of religious harmony that was pretty rare for the time.
So what does this number represent? 5. This stands for the massive assembly Harsha held every 5 years at Prayag, where the sacred Ganges and Yamuna rivers meet. It was called the Mahamoksha Parishad, or the Great Assembly of Liberation, and it was an incredible spectacle of generosity. Xuanzang actually went to one and described how Harsha would literally empty the royal treasury over 75 days, giving away all his wealth to scholars, monks, and the poor, no matter their faith. And this is where Harsha's legacy connects directly to our world today. That massive, periodic gathering at Prayag for religion and charity, historians believe it is the direct ancestor of the modern Kumbh Mela. Today, the Kumbh Mela is one of the largest peaceful gatherings of human beings on the entire planet. And to think that its origins can be traced back to an event started by Emperor Harsha over 1,400 years ago, that's just astounding.
Harsha's support for culture wasn't just about writing checks. He was an active participant. His court poet Bana wrote the Harshacharita, which was literally the first ever historical biography of an Indian king, a whole new genre. But Harsha himself was a writer, authoring 3 famous Sanskrit plays that people still study. And maybe most importantly, he was the chief patron of Nalanda University. This wasn't just a college, this was the Harvard of its day, drawing scholars from all over Asia.
Harsha funded it with the taxes from 200 villages, making sure it stayed the world's premier center for learning.
So, after this incredible 40-year reign of conquest, organization, and a golden age of culture, what happened? Harsha died around 647 AD, and he didn't leave a clear heir. And the historical record is blunt. His massive northern empire, his life's work, it just collapsed. Almost overnight, it shattered right back into that same fractured mess of little kingdoms that existed before he came along. The great unifier was gone, and the unity he created vanished with him.
And this brings us to our final big question. It's the central mystery of Harsha's reign. How could an empire so powerful, so culturally rich, be so fragile? Was it because the whole thing was held together by the force of his personality alone? Remember that decentralized system we talked about? It seems the local lords were loyal to Harsha the man, not to the empire itself. Once he was gone, there was nothing left to hold it all together. It makes you think, what makes a legacy truly last? Is it the genius of one person, or is it the strength of the institutions they build to outlast them? Harsha was a great man, a reluctant but amazing emperor, but the instant collapse of his life's work suggests that maybe his greatest achievement was just himself.